First of all, guys, I just want to say thank you very much for covering this case dutifully and respectfully. There were obviously a lot of salacious details in this case that caused it to get a lot of attention. But at the end of the day, this case is about two people, two neighbors of ours that were murdered almost 3 years ago here in Fairfax County. We take that very, very seriously. And to start off, I just want to thank the great detectives of the Fairfax County Police Department that put in yeoman's work to get this case here. I also want to thank the people in my office that put in hours during the last couple of years, not least of which are the three people standing behind me, Sylvia Villanueva, Kelly Sprisler, and Jenna Sands. You all saw how complicated this case was. A lot of digital evidence, a lot of forensic evidence, and this team behind me put it together in a way that a jury could understand, and they did it with professionalism and skill, the type that you will only see in a modern prosecutor's office like that we have here in Fairfax County. So at the end of the day, I am very, very pleased that we are able to stand here successfully having gotten justice for Joe Ryan and Christine Banfield. So who has questions?
Steve, how would you describe someone who would not only carry out these murders, but make up a story like he did, and then get on the witness stand and tell it again?
It's monstrous. I mean, that's really what it is. It's monstrous. I mean, we are the safest jurisdiction, safest large jurisdiction anywhere in America, meaning we don't have a lot of homicides, but I've been doing this job for a while, and I can tell you that this defendant stood out to me highest above all the other murder cases that we've done in my 6 years here.
Steve, in Juliana's proffer, there were, obviously that was 4 hours long, there was a lot of details, and there was a lot that your office chose maybe not to get into. Talk about what you wanted to highlight for this jury, what you thought was needed to successfully prosecute this case, and maybe some things that you chose not to introduce as evidence.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in this case. There were a lot of rabbit holes to run down. We knew two things going into this case. The case was about the blood. This case was always going to be in the blood. You heard it right from Jenna's opening statement. This case was about the blood. We knew that before we even charged this case. The second thing is we want it to be surgical. We want it to be in, we want it to be out. We didn't need to go through every single little thing. We didn't want to confuse the jury. We didn't want to burden them. We didn't want to put them to sleep. What we really wanted is we wanted the high level stuff, and you saw that. You saw us focus on the blood. You saw us use Juliana or have Juliana come up there to give flavor to what happened in that room. And then we used the blood, we used the digital forensics, we used everything else to support that and give flavor to that. So I think we asked for 4 weeks, but as we got into this trial, we realized that we could do it much quicker and much more effectively than if we took all 4.
How important was Juliana's testimony? You have the defense saying she has always maintained backing up Brendan Banfield until the very last minute here, and almost saying that you guys were too tunnel focused. Without Juliana's proffer, I mean, do you think we could have gotten to this result?
I think we can. As a matter of fact, we were planning for it. If you take a look at the timeline of the case, we did not authorize charges against Brendan Banfield until after we got the blood analysis done. That is what we were waiting for. And it wasn't until 2 months after we got the blood and we indicted Brendan for these crimes that Juliana decided to proffer and cooperate with us. So we had planned to go forward with just the blood evidence and everything else, and we felt that even with that, we could have put this case on. Now, of course, as a prosecutor, if you have somebody in the room and they want to proffer, they want to turn state's evidence, you're not going to turn that down. You're going to investigate that. We did that proffer. She told us some things that we had not known. We did check on her story. We felt confident in that story, confident enough to offer her the plea deal that we gave her and put her on the stand as part of our case in chief.
Can I ask Jenna a quick question?
Just briefly.
Yeah,
Steve,
let me get the jury and then I'll...
Did you get an opportunity to talk to Mr. Ryan and Christine's family? What did you say to them?
I had before. I did not get a chance to today. And I'm always very hesitant to speak for the victims' families. I know that it was a very, very emotional day. I imagine that maybe we'll be speaking again in the future. But I hope that this verdict gives them some sense of peace and puts them somewhere on the path towards healing after this tragic homicide.
Jenna, can I ask you a quick question?
Sorry?
What's your message to Banfield's daughter?
God, I mean, what do you say to a child in that situation? I don't know if I have a message for her, but I have a hope for her. I have a hope that she spends the rest of her life with people who love her and know that there were people in this world who loved her. And I hope that she always carries that in her heart. Now, Bob, you had a question for Jenna?
Yeah, Jenna.
Yeah, sure.
Take us through the strategy. It was talked about during the trial of arresting her first to get to him.
Sure. Well, there was originally a belief that was born pretty early in the investigation that she was an accomplice of Mr. Banfield's, that there was a plan. As our detectives uncovered more evidence that supported the possibility of the plan, the idea was formed to arrest her based on the evidence that we knew we had, because it would be a successful prosecution, but also with the hope that she would end up seeing the light and coming to us with her story. It was something that we obviously had to wait quite a while for, and to be honest, had given up on at the time that we charged Mr. Banfield. We weren't going to wait anymore. We were providing her with the discovery that she needed to be able to defend herself in her case, and so there was no expectation that she would turn. It was just really happenstance that we were reached out to by her counsel that she was finally ready to talk.
And you had a
mentioned in
chance
your
to question
closing-
him face to face.
Sorry, say
What
again.
was that like? You had a chance to question him finally on the stand
I
face
did.
to face. How do you describe him?
I think that everyone has commented on what was so obvious, that he was not truthful, that he was cold, that he behaved oddly in response to questions that should have elicited emotion, that he never spoke of himself as Christine's husband, that he didn't speak lovingly of his wife, that he showed absolutely no human emotion that we expected to see of someone in his position.
You mentioned your closing.
took the stand, and how do you prepare for?
Sorry.
You mentioned your closing how he wanted to be with Juliana, and hence the possible motive here. Outside of that, is there anything else as far as why he would commit this?
You know, it's really challenging to try to put yourself in someone like Mr. Banfield's mind. And I don't know that I want to try that hard, to be completely honest. I think that he was obviously hoping for a life with Juliana, and he didn't see a way to accomplish that without executing his wife.
Are you surprised that Brendan took the stand? Do you believe that actually might even help
Yes.
your case a little bit?
Yes, I, having been a defense attorney for years, I think I would have counseled against him taking the stand. But, Mr. Carroll didn't have a lot to work with. And at the end of the day, if his client wanted to testify, he had the absolute right to do so.
What was the thinking behind giving Juliana such a sweetheart deal?
So I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a sweetheart deal. She does face 10 years in prison. That has not yet been determined. It is obviously a reduction, and it is certainly reflective of her cooperation. But in order to encourage her to tell the truth, there had to be something. I think that the agreement that she entered into will hopefully allow for the judge to pass judgment on her in a way that is measurable. It will certainly never account for the lives that she was responsible for taking, but I think that the amount of time that she'll serve will be determined by Judge Ascarati, and I'm sure it will be appropriate.
So she hasn't agreed to your recommendation?
Correct.
or
The judge
concert?
is free to sentence her as she chooses within the statutory limitations.
It's 10 years, even the max is still a gift, right, for someone who's plotted and set up Christine and Joe Ryan. And there's a lot of violence in this murder.
That is
So I wanna
absolutely
get
true.
on-
Thank you, Jenna.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add to this. You guys have access to Jenna if you have more questions for her. But no, I think it's really, really important that we don't characterize this as a quote-unquote sweetheart deal. This is the work of being a prosecutor. She still is taking accountability for homicides. When you take a look at what the relative culpability is, I think that where we have landed is appropriate. And quite frankly, Juliana, by testifying, answered a lot of questions, not only for us, but for the jury. Let's not forget how important her testimony may have been to some of those jurors. So her still facing up to 10 years in prison is very, very significant and well worth the cost to make sure that Brendan Banfield was convicted for a crime where it is a mandatory life sentence. As the law is written right now, Brendan Banfield will not walk free for the rest of his natural life.
And Steve, is there anything else that a lot of times evidence does not get into a trial? What else should people know about this guy
Oh, you're right.
that you were not able to present to the jury that had convinced you guys he was guilty?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but for us, the evidence spoke volumes. I mean, we got our evidence in, what we thought was important, and I think that, in many ways, we're proud that we let the evidence speak for itself. So there's not really a lot of things that were outside the purview of the jury that led us to some kind of conclusion about what he did or what he did not do. We take a lot of pride, and we know the police take a lot of pride in following the evidence wherever it leads.
What do you hope Brendan Banfield is sitting in there thinking about right now?
I've always, I've been a prosecutor for, almost 15 years now. And I think about what goes through somebody's mind after they've been found guilty. And, quite frankly, my hope with this is that he realizes he didn't get away with it. And I know that sounds cliche, but I think through the evidence you can see a lot of things that he set up trying to get away with it, thinking that he was going to beat the system, trying to outsmart everybody. I hope he thinks that, and most of all, though, I hope he thinks about his wife and Joe and about what a heinous thing he did, because that's something that he is rightfully going to have to live with for the rest of his life. Any other? Yes, please.
I was just wondering, the relatives of...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, were the relatives there also related to Joe?
Or any Ryan relatives?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, they weren't here today, but they have
They're in
been
the
they have
past.
been in the courtroom.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Sorry, do you mean?
Steve,
Yeah.
rare to have cameras in the courtroom
Yes.
here in Virginia, particularly in a criminal case. A whole big part of the world watching this.
Yeah.
What do you hope the takeaway is for people who've been watching this incredibly salacious story here in our neighborhood? What do you hope the takeaway is for all these people that have been watching this play out?
Yeah, that's a great question, Drew. I think there are a couple takeaways that I hope they come away with. First of all, trials and this world, it's not Law and Order. It doesn't happen in half an hour. It's not black and white. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of nuance. So I want them to understand what this work is. But I think the one thing I want people in this community to take away from is they got to see their justice system in action, right? They don't have to read about it, they get to see it. And I hope what they saw is a modern professional prosecutor's office doing a job with a very, very difficult case. I mean, the forensics, the blood, all of these things are very, very difficult to parse, to talk about, to explain to a jury. And the team behind me, quite frankly, they made it look easy. And I think that really speaks to the level of professionalism, not only in the prosecutor's office, but with the courts generally, as well as the investigation of the county police department, which is top notch.
Steve, how about cameras in the courtroom all the time?
Bob, I'd love it. Honestly, I would not be opposed. We are proud of the work that we do here as the law enforcement apparatus in Fairfax County. We have nothing to hide. I would love everybody to see every one of our trials and see what goes into the decision making. We do almost 20,000 cases a year. And for people to really understand the nuance and how we agonize over a lot of these decisions to try to do justice, I think that would be great for this community to see.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No? Yes.
Sorry. The plan was very out of the normal realm or very extraordinary. Do you ever get any sense as to how this plan came about? Do you have any? Seriously, that's what most of
Well,
are asking, right?
I gotta say, it might be glib, but you if you watch the trial, you might have been able to see it. But no, but in all seriousness, no. We just have the evidence, and quite frankly, our job is to follow the evidence. And we heard what Juliana said. We heard what Brendan said. Those are our clues into what happened. But at the end of the day, we presented the evidence to the jury, and we're just very, very pleased that we're able to stand here knowing that we got justice for Joe and Christine.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, guys. Yeah.
Guys, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for sticking
County
it out.
Commonwealth
You bet.
Attorney Steve Descano, who talked about these crimes that we have been hearing about for the past few weeks as both salacious and monstrous. He He said Banfield and Juliana Magalhães planned to kill Banfield's wife Christine and Joseph Ryan, and he talked about how complicated this case was and how they had to rely on digital and forensic evidence, and his words were this was about the blood, that forensic evidence was key.
Yeah. And you know, Jenna Sands, the prosecutor for the case, that was in her opening statement, right? She said the blood evidence is what we have here for this case. And she also said Juliana is a great bonus, right? She's our witness, but this is a blood evidence based case. And you heard Steve Descano say he believes they could have won this case even without Juliana, who again didn't take the plea deal, didn't agree to testify until a month after Brendan Banfield was arrested.
Answering those questions again that we had earlier, why was she arrested first? Why did it take so long to arrest Brendan Banfield? But it sounds like they were working on that blood analysis to build their case against Banfield.
Right. They've said that pretty consistently through the trial. We were waiting on the blood evidence, and they had enough evidence to arrest Juliana first. Obviously, arresting Juliana first did help them. They were able to listen to the conversations Juliana was having with Brendan Banfield. They were in a relationship while she was in jail. So there were phone calls they could listen to, and obviously the letters played a big role here.
Yeah, it was interesting, and it caught all of our attention here when Jenna Sands started talking about this not being a sweetheart deal for Juliana Magalhães. We were under the impression that she had signed this deal and that because of it, she would get time served. So she would likely be done. Jenna Sands seems to suggest that the judge has the ability to sentence her to what she believes is within reason here, and that could be up to 10 years in prison.
And so the manslaughter charge, it does come with a potential maximum 10-year in prison. But the plea agreement she signed that we have back in the other room, it says that she would get time served. That is the recommendation. So could the judge come in and say, no, I'm going to give you the max sentence? Sure, it's possible, but our legal experts say it's unlikely because then they would be kind of going against that plea agreement, and the next attorney who tries to make a plea agreement with someone's going to be like, wait, the judge didn't uphold that last plea agreement, so it's unlikely.
We got to talk about Joseph Ryan,
Yes.
who just got caught up in all of this. We know that you spoke with his mother.
Right.
She told you how he was as a son, what she's going to miss about him. What is she saying about this, or any sort of relative about this verdict today?
Yeah, so as we've talked about at length, Joseph Ryan's mother was not able to be up here for the trial. She has been watching it virtually, and she's paying close attention to this because obviously her son is a victim, and now we know that he is a victim here, but he's being painted as a monster, you know? And so I just checked in with her, and she did share this statement with me, so I'd love to read that if we can. I thank the jury, the prosecution, the judge, and the justice system. I thank everyone that loved and supported Joe. Today is a good day. It does not bring Joe back, but it says that Brendan Banfield will pay for the crimes he committed on that day, and that makes this a good day. So she is breathing a sigh of relief right now, getting justice for her son, a young man who has been portrayed by the defense attorney, by Brendan Banfield, as a monster. Today we know he did not kill Christine Banfield.
He was on this website. Obviously his mom talked to you about his choices and preferences, but he certainly didn't think that he was going to a home where he was going to die.
Right, and you know, she talked at length about that. Just because he was into something that may not be considered normal, that doesn't give you the right to kill someone. That doesn't mean he deserved to die just because he was into something different. And she was very adamant about that, and she wanted people not to pass judgment on her son and to keep in mind the facts of the case, and it looks like the jurors did do that.
Yeah, and I keep thinking about their daughter as well, who also got caught up in this as well. You know, she's going to get older and look back at this and realize what happened in her home. She was there. We heard Steve Descano saying that he hopes that she spends the rest of her life with people who love her. And that touched a lot of folks.
I mean, can you even imagine if Brendan Banfield says he walks into the house and he hears signs of his wife not moaning with pleasure, but moaning in agony, that his daughter, who's 4 years old at the time, in the basement by herself, she's got to be hearing or sensing something is off.
Yeah, and during his testimony, he said that she seemed scared, but you know, that's why he was hit with that child endangerment charge, and he was found guilty of that child endangerment charge. I think that speaks volumes to what the jurors think of his choices to allow, you know, he says Juliana brought the little girl into the home, but he opened the door, he allowed them in.
He left it unlocked.
Right, he left it unlocked, he opened the door, let them in, and he wasn't even worried when he was asked on the stand, why didn't you call 911? Repeatedly asked that. weren't you worried about your daughter? And he said, that wasn't at the top of my mind.
Not at
It's
the top of my
interesting.
mind.
He didn't seem to answer most questions definitively.
Right.
You either know that you wrote a note, or you know that you left the door unlocked, or you don't. He never said yes or no. He would say, I don't believe that, or that wasn't the intent. I wonder if jurors started to think something's not right in addition to that as well. Like, you know what you know.
I mean, he clearly is an investigator, right? We know he worked for the IRS. He has a background in investigation, so he's likely testified before. And it almost felt like he was answering the questions as somebody on the stand, as an expert or as an investigator versus a person.
Which Steve Descano alluded to, saying that he
Right.
should know that he did not get away with this.
it.
Right, yeah.
Well, it has been a trial that has really captivated so many. It has changed so many people's lives forever, especially young Valerie, who we all, I think, share the same hope that Steve Descano does, that she grows up knowing that she's feeling love, but that hopefully she's also getting some help too, because that's a considerable amount of trauma for a young person to endure. And we know that the imprint of that trauma can impact the whole span of your life.
Yes.
So we really do hope that she is being cared for at this time.